Okay. Siguli, good morning. We have come to Ottawa to formally announce the AIAI Internation Trade Protocol signed between the 7 member First Nations of the Association of the Iroquois and Allied Indians, including Batchewana First Nation, Caldwell First Nation, Alnapawi or Delaware, Hiawatha First Nation, Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Wanta Mohawks. The signature of this protocol is a milestone in the development of foundational processes amongst the AIAI nations that are based in their own inherent authorities and jurisdictions rather than those delegated by Ottawa or those co-developed with insidious, rights-undermining, and top-heavy organizational structures. The signature of this protocol is a milestone in the development of foundational processes amongst the AIAI nations and establishes that relationship for the sharing of ideas, information, and knowledge that will help us build capacity and advance trade and commerce relations as First Nations peoples and nations. The protocol adopts our principles of trade and commerce and affirms our goals of peace, harmony, and prosperity for our communities. We as Indigenous peoples have inherited the responsibility to ensure that we preserve and protect Mother Earth and uphold the spiritual laws that govern the interdependent relationships between nature and humankind. This inalienable and sacred connection to all creation, land, air, water, sun, plants, and animals, is the spiritual basis of our existence. Based on our spiritual ways passed down through the generations within our ancient peoples, our trading relationships are based on respect, kindness, and sharing. We are in an age where reconciliation has become a part of our regular vocabulary, but reconciliatory actions are often symbolic, generally empty gestures. We are in an age where the relationship with Indigenous peoples is stated to be one of the most important by Canada. The support for development of our own culture-based governance capacities and rebuilding of our nations come with strings attached. Strings that attempt to deny us our jurisdictional authorities and to undermine our treaty relationship. As the AFN Assembly gets underway, AIAI would like to remind Canada and First Nations that only nations themselves can determine our paths to decolonization. We have the power to reinvigorate the systems that allowed our nations to thrive. We are starting to thrive regardless of what is happening at the AFN, regardless of what Crown government agendas may be. With the announcement of this protocol, we are hoping to remind all First Nation peoples and nations that we have all that we need to rebuild our economies and reinstate our own governance processes. We just need space and support for our own capacity, building work at the community and nation level. And we need support to develop and implement systems based on our own values and cultures. Systems that Canada has actively and willfully destroyed, and systems that only we ourselves can rebuild. So off to the side here is a copy of our agreement. Our member nations will have that. And so this will form the basis for our economic and other relations between our nations. So if there's any questions, we would be happy to take those now.
I think it's just me. Okay. Yeah, Fraser from ABC National News. So I noticed, or you probably saw as well, that the Crown Indigenous Relations, or the federal government, announced a lot of economic reconciliation sort of mantras or whatever in the budget. Are those not the kind of things, or that aren't working, I guess, that, you know, with government, I suppose, leading the way to advance this economic reconciliation, or is that not sufficient, what you saw in the budget, or what did you think of it, I guess?
I think some of those are okay. I haven't been able to look at the specifics of them, but oftentimes when there are funding, they do come with strings attached. And a lot of times it ties it back to the Canada delegating authority to First Nations rather than recognizing their inherent jurisdictions. And so those are the kind of things that we vehemently oppose because we do intend to exercise our jurisdiction one of the important things I think of note is recently the Vatican's renunciation of the doctrine of discovery, and of course that underlies Canada's policies and legislations with regards to Indigenous peoples. And so we see that as a moral compunction for Canada to also abide by that renunciation of the doctrine and begin the decolonization of its laws and policies, especially those that purport to delegate authority over and to First Nations.
And just as a follow-up, I guess with the trade protocol, I know it's a protocol, just at this point, so you just signed it, but could you give me maybe an idea of how it may work and what sort of goods maybe the nations are interested in trading between each other?
Basically what it does, it sets the relationship and foundation for information sharing and capacity building for trade and commerce, and also for governance processes that will impact all areas. Some people might think it's about either tobacco or cannabis, but it's really beyond focusing on one type of product or economic driver. It's really helping us to work together to reestablish our own processes of trade and commerce, and so that our economies can become more diverse and aligned with the values and principles of our people. Our economies have been actively criminalized and thwarted by Crown legislation, both at the federal and provincial levels, mostly provincial lately. And we are setting foundations for working together to rebuild systems that work for us and make sense to us.
If you have any other question, you can go ahead. There's nobody else.
Yeah,
So.
I know, I think that's fine for me.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much for your time.